I'm pleased to welcome everyone here tonight for the second of our referendum panel discussions, Voices. The very first priority in our strategic plan is to reflect the rich diversity of our community in how we collect, preserve, and share our unique Western Australian stories. Through our exhibitions, events, and partnerships, we are proud to provide a platform for discussion, ideas, and to hear a diverse range of Western Australian voices. Tonight's event is an extension of that goal. Thank you to our panelists for contributing to tonight's discussion, and thank you to you, the audience, for being an important part of this dialogue. It is important to us that tonight's conversation is respectful. If you would like to ask a question at the end of this panel, please do keep your questions concise and in the spirit of open conversation and perspective sharing. Tonight's conversation will ask elders Farley Garlett, Irene and Albert McNamara, and youth leaders to share their stories, thoughts and hopes of what the future will look like for Western Australians. Tonight's session will be recorded and made available on our website, but for the audience, only the backs of some of your heads will actually be in the frame. I will now hand over to our moderator, Sisonke Msimang. Thank you.
Kaya, everyone. My name is Sisonke, and I'll be moderating the conversation this evening. I also want to pay respects to elders, past and present. In my language, which is isiZulu, we say "sanibonani," which means "I see you." And the response when you say "sanibonani" is "yebo," yes. So "sanibonani," yebo. So that's a way of recognizing where we are and to recognize that all of our ancestors don't necessarily speak only using English. Yeah, so my ancestors can speak to the ancestors of Indigenous people here in the languages and tongues that we all understand, similarly to all of you in the audience, that we have other ways of communicating with one another. So what I'm hoping for the panel discussion this evening is that we have a conversation that is, of course, grounded in respect, but also that is grounded in trying to have a conversation that's different from the many conversations we've been having in the lead up to the referendum. It's getting to that very tricky, difficult time, and I think it's an important time for us to treat ourselves with care and maybe to think a little bit outside the box about how we're framing some of these conversations. So I want to begin by framing the conversation differently and to say we're not going to go straight at the voice with a capital V. What I'd like to do is begin by introducing everyone on the panel properly and then asking a question about the first time you used your voice. When was the first time you used your voice? I'm going to let you think about that as I read your fancy introductions. So all the way on the other side, in the green top, is Sophie Coffin. She's a lawyer, a youth leader, and an educator. She's a proud Paukyu woman, a Yinji Barnji lawyer from the Pilbara. Sophie has a strong interest in social justice. She volunteers a lot of time educating others in the community. She's participated as a delegate at the U.S. Department of State's International Visitors Leadership Program, learning about Indigenous leadership from Native American peoples. So lots of cross-pollination there. Thank you, Sophie. Ezra Jacob Smith is a youth leader, advocate, and a Noongar man with connections to Wajab, Ballardong, Minang, Korang, and Wilman country. Ezra works as a cultural development and design lead for the Aboriginal Cultural Centre of WA, this big thing that's coming up that's very exciting. Working for the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries. In 2016, Ezra was selected as a youth delegate at the Perth Regional Dialogue, and so he attended the Uluru Convention at Yulara, where the Uluru Statement from the Heart was conceived, and so Ezra is a signatory to the statement. Aunty Irene McNamara is a community elder and a proud Yamachi Mirning woman. Aunty Irene McNamara says she was born in Carnarvon, but raised everywhere. I can relate to that feeling. In 1940, her grandmother, 8 of her aunties and uncles were all put on a boat and sent from Carnarvon to Fremantle. From there, they were taken to Moore River Native Settlement, and we will hear more about Aunty Irene's story. Welcome, Aunty Irene. And Uncle Albert McNamara is a community elder. He has a part-time job as Aunty Irene's husband. He's devoted his life to improving outcomes for the Aboriginal community. Uncle Albert is passionate about reconciliation, transforming the community, and improving health and educational outcomes for his people. He's motivated by his extended family, his pride in his culture, and a commitment to see an improved life for Aboriginal people. And Farley Garlett is a proud Garlett is a proud Noongar elder who was raised on Balindong country, who lived and professional experience embedded in native title and Aboriginal heritage, and is passionate about working positively with Aboriginal people to achieve meaningful community outcomes. Farley is currently a board member of Noongar Outreach Services, Noongar Mia Mia Housing Corporation with Manja Buja or Aboriginal Corporation. So this is our esteemed panel.
Thank you.
So maybe I'll start where I ended with you, Farley. I'm going to ask you, when was the first time you remember using your voice?
Well, I think it was in a little country town called Merredin in the wheat belt. I'd come down from the reserve. I lived on a reserve. And I know that when some people think about the reserve, they think about these wonderful tin houses that we had there, but I didn't live in one of those. I lived in Tinumpi. There was no reserve. There was just a block of land out of town where an army barracks used to be well before we moved out there. And the government at that time was looking for somewhere to put us out of the way and away from town. And so they gave us this land that the army had vacated and went away. And one morning my grandfather woke up and he said to me, "Would you run down to the butcher and ask for some meat?" And I think he gave me a shilling, well, 2 shillings or whatever it was, and I bought pieces. I don't know, all you old fellas might remember the pieces. It was the leftover of the cuts they couldn't sell. And so we'd go for the cheapest cut. We'd probably get more out of that with the money that we had. And I went in there and there was other people in the shopping centre and in the butcher shop. And I knew the butcher really well. I went to play sport with his children. I went to school with them. And I was standing there, and of course it was the days when we had to wait for everybody, all the non-Aboriginal people to get served. And we'd wait patiently there, trying to, I suppose, control our temper and our anxiety and all them other things. And then I said to him, "Excuse me, Mr. So-and-so," and I'll just forget his name at the moment, but I was here first. And the bloke was getting served, the guy that was getting served, looked around and he said, "Yes, he was. So you serve him before you serve me." So I got served and I got the pieces and I ran all the way back to the reserve, which was a mile and something away from town, and gave it to my grandfather. And I remember my mother coming back, because she was a nanny and a cleaner for the farmers, and she came back every fortnight, and she came and she said, "Oh, I met Mr. So-and-so down the street," and he said that son of yours will be something one day. He stood in the butcher shop and he said to me, "Excuse me, I was here first." He said, "It was the first time anybody had ever said it to me." And I just got sick and tired of standing around there waiting. I wanted to go and play somewhere, We lived next to a big rock and a big dam, so there was plenty of places for me to play. So I thought, I'm going to risk it here, whatever it is, And so that was the first time I'd used my voice for something like that. And it made me feel good when he said that.
Aunty Irene, can I ask you the same question? Do you remember the first time you used your voice to stand up for yourself or someone else?
It was, I wanted to join the Navy. I was 18 and I went in there on Barrack Street. It was to, my friends joined, so I thought, I'll go and join too. And they were accepted. I went in and asked, "Can I join?" And he asked me for my date of birth and everything, and then he asked me for my citizenship card. And I said to him, "I don't have a citizenship card." He said, "Yes, you need one if you want to join the Navy." I said, "You need a citizenship, not me. This is my country, This, my family, everybody from here, we're all us Aboriginal people, this is our country. We don't need a citizenship. And but he was apologetic, though. He said, "I'm sorry, but I don't make the rules," you know. He was a young fella, and he probably got all that from the oldies, you know. Yeah, so that's when I found, I knew I had a voice. I could argue back, but in the country towns, most of them, you can't. Of course, I lived in a country town before I come to Perth. In the country towns, we just lived there. We lived on the reserve, another army barracks that was used. We all moved in there, and the first ones in got the cement pieces. And we had the water from the well. We carried it up. And because I didn't know any other life, I thought, this is the life. Yeah. This is... I was happy, though. I was happy on the reserve. We had everybody there from all over WA on that reserve when the Moore River settlement closed. But I only joined back there when I was 13. I was in... When my grandmother and 8 of my uncles and aunties came down, Mum was expecting me, so once she had me, she followed her family down. And from there, the Moore River settlement, I belonged to my family until I was 5. And then once I was kindy age, I was taken from my family and locked up in a kindergarten place where you slept, ate, and had kindy. And then once I became turning 6, we were locked up in big dormitories at night. And when I'm going too long, am I?
No, I'll tell you when you're going too long.
I always get carried away, you know.
That's what we're here for. We're here to hear you get carried away.
Yes. Anyway, look, I thought I might as well put it all together. Parts of it, and from Moore River settlement, when I was 9, trucks came in, and Mum and Dad and my grandmother, they were all in Moora, because Gran had a house in there, and they lived on the reserve there, 3 miles out of the town. And then from when I was 9, the settlement closed. A truck came and took all the Protestants to Rowlands, all the Catholics, which was me, to Wandering Mission, and the Catholic boys to Tarden. And we used to go home every Christmas. But in the first place, in that 3 years, I had 3 different nuns. We had the English first, and then we had the Italian nuns who couldn't speak a word of English, and then we had the Germans. And from there, we used to go home every Christmas. And so one year, after 3 years, we told our and Mum and Dad, we don't want to go back. So we went to live on the reserve, and then they tried to get us to go back, the native welfare, big argument, Mum and Gran, but it worked out that they didn't sign us to go to Wandering, and so we didn't have to go back. And but the Moore Reserve, we all became one big family. You know, if it wasn't for us, if we were put in a place on our own, we would be sorry people, but we were with everybody, our own people, and everything was good. And the reserve is the best place I ever lived on because of the families. You know, we all became one big family. Everybody called my Granny Irene. Anyway, so that's part of mine.
Lots of interesting stories about using your voice.
And yes.
Both within your own community and outside when you told that Navy person off. So I want to come back to these issues around what it means when we use our voices and to protect ourselves. Sophie, you want to take the question?
Sure. I think for me it would have been when I was at school, and in primary school I can remember times when kids would say things that were probably racist, and being really little you don't really think that you have a voice or that you should do something about it. But I remember times when I would say to kids that that's not okay, and these are the reasons why, because I was lucky to have really strong parents who always instilled in me what was and wasn't okay, and that there's just no tolerance for racism. And even though I was kind of shy when I was younger, I think that was a time that really stands out to me, is when I realised I could use my voice to help educate people and help people to realise someone else's point of view and what it's like, because at the schools I went to there weren't many Aboriginal students, so it was very hard to speak out against that, because you're up against a big majority of non-Aboriginal kids who have strong ideas, and kids can be very horrible at times. So that could be very difficult. So that's probably the time that stands out for me.
Yeah. Thanks, Sophie. Ezra?
Yeah, I was struggling to think of like a story actually, but Sophie sort of reminded me of like a bit of my journey. I think it was sort of, around like friends. A lot of my friends in school were non-Indigenous, and so you'd often hear the usual jokes or comments about Aboriginal people that were inappropriate that they'd heard from older siblings or their parents or something like that. And I remember sort of vividly, like we were all walking in a group one day and someone told a joke and it was racist, and I sort of pulled them up about it, and it was the same as, we're not talking about you, we're talking about the other Aboriginal people. And I was like, what, like my grandfather and my family? And so that was like a moment that stuck out for me. And as a young person, it's sort of hard to know when you can, stand your ground on those sorts of things. But I think getting to that point, to have that confidence to sort of speak back to my best friends, because they're like your friends, it's quite a challenge actually. But it was sort of having my grandfather as a role model, and from a young age he would take us along to meetings and consultations around projects that were happening on our country, and so we would be there as like 10-year-olds or even younger, and it wasn't until we were sort of early teenagers that he encouraged us to start having input into the conversation, if we had ideas that we wanted to contribute. So even from that young age he was encouraging us to speak up, which was something that was quite different, because when you're with the elders you sit back and you let them speak, but Pop would, if he'd encouraged us, we were expected to say something. So it was a bit of a crash course in public speaking, which I think helped me in other places.
Uncle Albert?
Well, being the oldest in the family goes back to my school days, and being the oldest, I had to stick up for my brothers and sisters. I've got 2 other brothers and 1 sister, rest in peace. And when they used to get called names, I had to stick up for them and stand up. Otherwise, I'd get it off Mum and Dad when I got home for not standing up for my brothers and sisters. And then when I went back to school the next day, I used to get it off teachers. So it used to be, a no-win situation. But that's where I learned to talk up for myself. And I thought, well, if I'm going to get in trouble, I'm going to get in trouble for good, because we used to get called quarter caste, half caste, bungs, niggers, spear chuckers, bardy eaters, and but now we've got to learn to work together, make the changes together. That's what it's about. But it always takes me back to school days. I got called a lot of names, and my brothers and sisters got called names, but that's what brings me back. I went to a primary school, got called names there, then I went on to high school and got called names there. But it's like you have to stand up for your family, and that's why Aboriginal people, somewhere along the line, they're all related. That's why you stand together, work together.
That's right. So I just wanted to note that in all the answers, it's so interesting how the impulse is towards education rather than anger. It's interesting that even when the insult is against you, the impulse is to correct and to teach. And I suppose I've been thinking a lot about how in this in this lead up to the referendum, there's been a lot of a lot of angry voices and a lot of polarization and a lot of division, but also there's been a lot of teaching, a lot of educating in the face of that anger, in the face of that polarization, in the face of that division. And I wonder whether you have some thoughts or comments about how you yourself manage anger, because where I would love to take us in this conversation is towards thinking about the future, because it is an intergenerational conversation. And so one of the things that we all have to do when we care about issues is to think about how we manage our emotions, ourselves. And one of them right now, even people who, no matter what side they're on, I think there's a lot of anger that is the undercurrent of this conversation. And all of you have spent lifetimes managing other people's anger as well as your own anger. So I'm interested in how you develop that skill. What is it that you do with anger? Whoever wants to go first.
It really goes back to what you were talking about, education. The education system really let the Aboriginal people down because they never put part of the curriculum Aboriginal culture into it. But I got taught Italian and French. I had no ambition to go to Italy or go to France. I want to learn about my own culture and be proud of it. I've got 5 boys and 3 girls. I've got 19 grandchildren and 17 great-grannies and 6 great-great-grannies. I've got 5 generations between us. So, I teach all my grannies.
Sorry, go ahead. I just thought the number of children deserves a clap. In my culture, greatness is attached to the number of, people that you can produce.
I want to see a better future for my kids, my grannies, and my great-great-grannies, because I don't want them going through what I had to go through. And a part of the voice is about working together, walking together, and making the change together. That's what it's about. It's not about taking people's land away or their house away from them. We just got to partner up and make it one straight, point of view, instead of saying, we assume this is what the Aboriginal people want. Yeah. Assuming's only another word for guessing. You're only guessing what people want. You've got to get off your butt and go and talk to them.
To them fellas.
Thanks, Alva. Anger. How do you deal with anger, Aunty Irene?
I'm not a person to get angry much, but I suppose when I was a kid, young, I would get angry when someone calls your names, and all you want to do is punch them. Yeah. And that's what you do. You punch them. And then you either, if you don't punch them at school, you wait till after school and punch them. Yeah. And so, but I dealt with anger, but as I grew older, because I worked with when I was in Wandering, we only went to grade 4, so the whole 3 years I was there, I was in grade 4. Then when I went to Mora, I was in grade 4, and I was in grade 4 with these 9-year-olds, and I'm 13. And I was glad when Dad got a job out bush, and we all went bushy, went post-cutting out bush. But sometimes dealing with anger, and I throw things around. You do that, eh? You just chuck things, slam doors and cupboards and...
That's why you make that noise at home.
Yeah.
Did you hear that? That's why you make that noise at home.
Yeah, there's lots of ways of anger, but I've learned to control my anger. I hardly get angry at home at all. I only get angry with Albert. But, kids can do whatever, and I won't get angry. They can do whatever at home, but whatever their life is, that's their life. Let them.
You've learned to rise above it.
But I've worked, with the education department for 30 years, and then I worked in hospitals, and Armidale, 2 hospitals. I worked till the year I turned 72. And I worked because I had a lot of energy, you know, sitting at home. When I'm at home, I used to go also to Royal Perth and do voluntary work there as well. And but we looked after, we reared also our 5 grannies up, and we reared up, almost all my brothers and sisters came. We always had room in our house. There was always room in our house them days when I was younger. Even though I'd come home and cook for 13 people or something, there was room in the house for everybody. My sister lived there, my brothers would come, even the nephews, They would come if they got nowhere, they'd come. And but there's a lot of rules, so they don't hang around for too long. But yes, so it's and I think that's too where I found my voice at home, not anywhere else about making rules, you know, a rule, this is what's what. And but I don't know, even when, you know, when I worked in the hospitals, I never used my voice. I just was there for the patients, you know, make them happy, so I didn't have to use my voice.
That's because you were busy terrorising everyone at home. That's because you were busy terrorising them at home with your rules. and Albert. Farley, anger. Talk to us about
I
anger.
guess there's a lot of reasons to get angry.
Yeah.
But you very quickly realise that anger's not going to get you where you want to be. And so you need to temper that anger, as well as a lot of other things in your life. There was a lot of things that I wanted to happen. I lived on the reserve. I wasn't even classified really as a citizen. School was difficult for me. I wasn't welcome. I never took a report home in all the years I was at school. I was only ever going to be... my perception of it when I got older was that the teacher saw that I was only going to be a labourer, and so why put the time and effort into him? So I could sit in the classroom all day and dream about things that I wanted to be or that I wanted to happen, and never be interrupted, except on Friday, sports days, because we were all very good sportsmen. And I became the sports prefect. And I thought that was a wonderful honour that I got this sports prefect, you know. So I used to polish the footballs while everybody doing their maths and English and all the other things, and I'd be polishing the footballs and getting the bats nice and oiled up and all that. And I loved that. I thought, this school is wonderful. I never took anything home, but I knew how to keep all this sports equipment really good, in good order. And but my father was a compulsive paper reader. He read the West Australian, or the paper at that time, and I know that there was a Daily News in those days, and a lot of the older people would remember that Daily News. And he used to get it, but he only got it because of the races. He was a race man, and he'd be sitting at the table and be reading, like, you know, the odds on and who's the favourite and all this. But when he put that paper down, I would grab it, and I would be looking at the news. And of course, if you want to learn a little bit about English and how to put words together, you read the newspaper. Journalists were fantastic at doing that sort of stuff. So I learned a lot of that stuff from them. And so public speaking became very good and easy for me, because I had the words, and my cousins recognised that I had this skill with words, and that I wasn't afraid to use words. And so we'd go to a shop and they'd say to me, you go in the shop and you talk for it, because you know how to talk Wagula, which is white fellas talk, you know? And I thought that was a bit of an honour anyway, you know? So they'd all stand behind me and I'd be in there, you know, like, can I have this please, and, you know, thank you, and all the well-mannered stuff and all that, you know? But they loved me doing it, so I continued doing that for years, and of course it stood me in great stead for later on when I became in the positions where, you know, I was dealing with John Howard and Amanda Vanstone and Phil Ruddock over in Canberra, walking the halls of Parliament and having conversations with them, and so it was quite easy for me. But anger was something that we had to manage. I mean, there was times when I just wanted to grab people and clout them. I did a couple of times, you know. I remember when this kid hit me with a tennis ball, with a cricket ball in the head. I was a sports prefect, and I was asked for all the sports gear to come back, and he threw a cricket ball and hit me in the head. And I sat there all day cleaning these bats and the footballers thinking, how am I going to get him? How am I going to get him? And I knew that he ran home and he went down the gully in Meriden and up the other end to get to the railway house where he lived. So I got a sickness all of a sudden in my tummy, and so I left school early. And I went to this place where he goes down the gully and up again, and I laid back there with my hands above my head, and he come running because he knew that I was after him, and he came over the hill and he came down, and here I was laying there, He started crying immediately. I hadn't even touched him, He just started crying because he knew what was coming. Then I got sorry for him. And so I just said to him, look, well, the next time you hit me with that ball, I'm going to get you for this. And I let him go. And I thought to myself after, I should have gave him a whacking, but I didn't. But anger I was quick to anger with a lot of stuff because frustration was part of it. And all these things that we were doing and trying to get people together and, look at each other as human beings and all of those other things. There was things that kept knocking us down. And it was the racist names and the name calling and, the bus wouldn't even pick us up to go to school and the school bus would go past and all the kids would be hands out the window calling us names and it wouldn't pick us up. So then we'd just walk to school and go to school and it was really hard and difficult. So anger was right here, but we managed it because we also learned how to fight. Living on a reserve with all these other Aboriginal people and boys your own age, there was a pecking order. And you had to learn where you fitted into that pecking order. And part of that was actually, having fights, and elders encouraged it. It stopped all arguments and telling on each other and all that. You sorted your issues out very quickly and then you got on a lot better. So, but I managed it. There was a few times I slipped over the years, but, they were very few and far between. So we sit here today thinking that there was a lot of times when I would have loved to grab some of those blokes and gave them a whacking and taught them a few lessons. But I had a friend of mine, non-Aboriginal friend, he was a farmer. He said to me the other day, we still catch up. He rings me every week and asks how I am, how are you going, what are you doing? And he said to me, Farley, in all of those years I never knew that you lived on the reserve. I actually thought you lived in town with everybody else. And I said, no, I lived out of town. And I used to see him on the weekends playing sport. And he said, well, I never knew that. He said, I always thought that you lived in town, you were the same as us, and that you didn't suffer with any of that other stuff, the racism stuff or anything like that. I said, no, I went through hell, but I came out the other side, And him and I are still mates, and we still talk about that. And it's good to talk to him about that because we both come from the same town. We had kids together. We're equals now. He's now sold his farm and he's moved down to Perth, so we catch up and we have cups of coffee and have a yarn. So that's a really positive from that. And I've got a lot of friends like that, a lot of farming friends who I'd worked for. My first job when I left school, and school was, I just turned 14, and I thought, well, school's not going to do much for me, so I'm going to go and get a job. And I got a job for a pig farmer. And my first job in the morning was to open the pigsty up and to clean it with a shovel. I don't know whether any of you know what a pigsty is like, and you open that door in the morning and the gas, I was like, I had to walk away and stand there for at least half an hour until it cleared. But I went back in there and I shoveled it all on the truck, put the truck in first gear, went to the paddock, got on the back and shoveled it off. We used it as fertiliser as well. But I loved it. It gave me something to do, and it was teaching me things. And of course the farmer was a very good man to me, He looked after me. As far as, he didn't pay me very much, but he was always kind to me. And so I loved it, even though it was a job that was cleaning the pigsty out. It was giving me something to do, and school never even gave me any of that. So anyways, we're here today, and we're, I guess, the better for all the things that we've done. You learn along the way all of those little skills about life and living and treating other people, and you come out with a view that we're all the same, we're all Australians, but how do we get together? The big question is, how do we get together?
Yeah.
And I guess if I go on to The Voice, I thought that everything was honky-dory. Then all of a sudden somebody mentioned The Voice and the referendum, and then I saw all these people coming out of the woodwork. And of course I'd been in Canberra, and I had 3 years or 6 years in Canberra as elected leader from the Nyungar country in Perth here, and I met all of those politicians, All of them in Parliament when I was over there walking the halls of Parliament and speaking to him. And to see him come out and say no, like it's something as simple as a recognition for your First Nations people. I'm astounded, and I wonder how people get to that point where, you know, it can only be a positive. It's about bringing people, all of us. I know all these fellows. We do a lot of work on committees and advisory committees, and we're probably killing ourselves anyways in doing that. But it's about bringing people together and telling our stories and, you know, sharing stuff. We tell some of the most tragic stories going about our lives, but we tell it because I think people need to know those stories. And the same as we need to know everybody else's stories. You can't make a judgment on anyone if you don't know who they are. And it's something as simple as that, but we often do it, and we do it regularly. So, anyways, that's a little bit about me.
Sophie and Ezra, do you want to take a stab at this question about anger and what we turn it into? Because I think we've gone along that path. How do we think about transforming anger?
Yeah, well, it's a hard act to follow.
Yeah.
But
that's why I'm asking you guys after I ask the oldies.
yeah, thank you for sharing the stories too. For me, yeah, I think that it's from having positive role models in my parents, where I've seen so many instances of them faced with racism and discrimination firsthand and how they've dealt with it. And it's always calm, educating people, or maybe they get fired up, but they're always coming from an angle of trying to educate the person instead of just resorting to violence or something. And I don't think Aboriginal people are inherently violent. We are more trying to keep the peace and educate and tell stories. So I also find that when people are educated, then they change their view and they change their mind, because a lot of the time it just comes from misinformation, which you're seeing with The Voice now. But for all of these years throughout my life where there's been racism, once people understand, oh, this is why that's not true, or this is why that name is really offensive, then they say, oh, I didn't realise that, usually. So having great role models, I think, who have been very calm and prefer to teach rather than resort to anger and violence.
Yeah. Thanks, Sophie. Ezra?
Yeah, yeah, it's a big one, anger. I think it's like, I don't know, when I was a kid, I just remember thinking I'm just going to be the angriest person ever. I'm going to beat everyone at being angry, and you get so angry you forget why you're angry sometimes. But I was like quite good at doing that, and I've had to really learn, like, in my short sort of time alive already, like how to deal with anger and not to sort of bed yourself down in it. There's a lot of stuff obviously to be angry about, like everybody said. But for us mob, we've got that kind of, the intergenerational trauma, I think, is another aspect of it that that doesn't really get sort of dealt with well by our mob. Like it's something we're all sort of collectively working out. But I've sort of been really conscious of that, the effect of intergenerational trauma, and it's linked to anger and, an inability to manage your emotions or anything like that. So I've sort of worked hard to try to get on top of those things. And these days I try not to get angry about anything really, because I just don't feel like it serves me. Like, the state it puts your body into, I don't feel like it's healthy or good for me. Like, I'm going to be active and I'm going to do the good things that I do regardless of whether I'm angry or not. I mean, I try to use anger as a driver, and I try not to show it too much. I don't know if that's a good strategy or not, but it seems to be working. Yeah.
We have a saying, there's an African proverb, you'll have to forgive the crudeness of the proverb, but I think it's an interesting one, and it says, it's only when the mosquito lands on your testicles that you learn that violence is not the only answer. Testicles.
I'm glad she said that joke.
So when the thwack hits you, then you realize, oh, if I hit myself that hard, maybe I need to think about a few other options other than this particular hard course of action.
Yeah.
So I bring up the African proverb to say, people usually don't forget that one. So I bring up that proverb to say that we are now in a situation where it's clear that the hard way of doing things, not necessarily violence, but divisive, polarizing, et cetera, is not one that serves Aboriginal people very well.
That's right.
But it's also a decision that is now going to be made in a week and a half's time, that is one that will not be made largely by Aboriginal people.
No.
So we find ourselves in this very interesting conundrum. I'm South African, and people love to hear about Nelson Mandela. And in 1992, we found ourselves in the same situation as Black South Africans. Yeah. There was a referendum had to be held to vote yes or no to whether or not to proceed with reform.
Yep.
So before our elections, there was a decision that had to be made and say, the negotiations have started, they are stalling. The white population was asked to vote in a referendum because they were the only people on the voters' roll. Okay, Black South Africans were not on the voters' roll yet. So the question was, to white South Africans, will you vote yes to move forward, or will you vote no, not to move forward with the negotiations? Nelson Mandela, at the time, of course, had just been released from prison, and the principle of white people voting on the future of the Black majority was offensive, right? So you would think that then the decision would be made that Black people would not support the referendum and would not encourage people to vote yes or no, because in principle, why are other people determining what we do with our future? And of course, in his infinite wisdom, Nelson Mandela said, we have no choice but to move towards peace. So all of the Black people in South Africa, knowing that they were not on the voters' roll, pushed, and newspaper ads and everybody, jingles and songs, everybody moving towards getting white people to vote yes to moving forward. Because we understood that once they had said yes to moving forward to talk, then the real change would happen. And if we didn't do that, then what would happen is every time they ran into a problem in the negotiations, the white leaders would say, we don't have the country behind us. We don't have white people behind us, so we can't actually move forward to put you in the Constitution, right? So I tell this story because we are in this situation where the future of what Aboriginal people's rights in some ways will look like in this country rests on not the people sitting in this, right? The people here have a vote, but the majority are not Aboriginal people. So the question is, what do you say to that majority?
Well, I mean, we're 30%. We wait for 70% of the people to vote on whether we get recognised or not. It's what we have to deal with. And as much as we might not like that, we are 30%. And so we rely on the people that we have spent our life working with and educating them about where we come from and how we managed to get as far as we have, to at least have common sense and have a look at what this is all about. And I've got a lot of trust in all of you. I think that you are our people. We one time ago we thought that you were our enemy, but the fact of the matter is that you have now become our people. We have married into each other, and we have children that are half Nyunga and half Wajala. And so we encourage them to understand their Wajala side as well as their Nyunga side. And the mix is dynamite. It's awesome. My son's at university now at the moment and studying, and his mother was a psychologist. And so I have great faith in the 70%. And I hope that they have common sense to have a look at this in its format properly and understand that this is just a recognition of the First Nations people. Our stories belong to you. Our cultural places belong to you now. You are a part owners of it, as the same as us. And so we put a lot of our hopes and aspirations on the 70%. And each and every one of us, and you know, I'm on a few committees with Uncle Albert and Aunty Irene. I'm the baby there, and I'm 74. So you can imagine the lifetime they spent doing all this stuff. So I learn from them, and I hear the way the life they lived, which was before me. It was hard enough with my life, and then to watch them, and I can't let them down with my anger and my disappointment. So I take the positive attitude that I do from them. We work with young Shana, came to the Perth City Council. There was a time when I was the ATSIC Commissioner, which was the elected leader of all the Nyungas in the southwest, and I couldn't get into Perth City Council because of the mayor there at the time. It was disappointing because we wanted to say to him, we're here, we're support for you, and you can use us anytime. But it didn't happen. But you know, we didn't complain. We tucked it away in a dark spot, but now we're in there. And so we're making hay while the sun shines, you might say. So, and Shana was a big help in all of that. These two was a big help for me, but other elders who told their stories as sad and as you know, debilitating as they were, but we try to tell it in the most positive light possible. That yes, they were the times, and we suffered through those times, but at the end of the day, there's a light shining, and we aim for that light, and that's what we do. Our light is our lives are focused on that single glimmer of hope, and this referendum for us is about hope.
You want to weigh in, Uncle Albert?
I'll go back to what Farley said, because years ago Aboriginal people couldn't even get a foot in that foyer of the Perth City Council. But now we're up on the 9th floor telling them how to work with Aboriginal people. So there's a change coming up with there. And Australia's one of the worst countries in the world because they don't acknowledge the traditional owners of the country. You know, every other country in the world acknowledges the first people, except Australia. So, you know, we've got to work together, walk together, make the change together. And that's what it's all about. Yeah. Because we can't have people making decisions or assuming this is good for Aboriginal people, because it's not.
Aunty Irene, what's your take on this idea of progress?
I'll go back to when we had the referendum for our citizenship. Well, we weren't allowed to vote because we didn't have our citizenship to vote at all. But mind you, it all came about and we got in, we won, so I'm hoping the same thing will happen at the referendum on the 14th, or people who go beforehand and vote. And it's voting for, you know, we're humans, you know. We were classed as flora and fauna, and we still are. In the books, we still are flora and fauna. That hasn't changed, and we want that constitution to change, to say we are the first people here, have been. Australia is our country, always was and always will be. And we're happy to share it with everybody. We don't want to go and say to a farmer, get off there, this is our land, I want to go and look for artefacts. And we don't want to do that. All we want to do is recognition, have recognitions. And you know, Australia is very racist. You know, when the Italians come, they were all picked on. And when the people from India, other dark-skinned people come, they were picked on. And so, you know, we got to all, like Uncle Albert says, we all got to work together, you know, make changes together, and not divided. and we're dividing each other. And with the yes and no business, all of a sudden, these politicians, we're hearing their voice. We never heard their voice before. Yeah, the no people, you know. I said, never even heard. Then not even from here, WA. And, but, you know, we need to. We're modular families as well, you know. We all marrying into each other, and it'll carry on, and it'll be more so till there'll be less modulars than everybody else. But you know,
I tried to clarify the other day. Do I count as modular? And then I was given a very evasive answer. It's like, you're not a modular, but you're not us. But I definitely recognize, so I definitely recognize that there are some young Aboriginal boys and girls who would make good partners for my two. So we're coming in there too with the intermarriage.
So everybody's coming together, and I hope you go away with good thoughts from us when you leave here and make your way home. There won't be so much traffic.
As there was coming. I want to ask a question about whether there are any arguments for that the No campaign is making that make you think twice, that make you think, all right, fair enough, that's a good point. I can hear that. I have an argument against it, but I get where they're coming from. Ezra, do you want to take that question first?
Yeah, I don't know about thinking twice. I'm pretty sure about what I'm doing. I'm voting yes. But I think there's merit in some of the, arguments, particularly from mob, around the referendum. Like people who are saying that it's not, it's not delivering justice to us and it's not going far enough. Like I get that stuff, completely understand it, and I think they're well within their rights to hold those opinions. And I agree with them in a lot of ways. Because while this referendum isn't about justice, like ultimately for me, that's what it's about for us and for my people, and I'll continue to work, in my life to achieve that for my people. And so, the voice is a stepping stone in that process, I see, but we've still got a long journey to go. So yeah, it's not about thinking twice or reconsidering, but it's not clear cut for everybody, and I think that's okay as well.
Sophie, did you want to take that as well?
Yeah, I feel the same as Ezra. I don't have any doubt about what I've already voted, because I voted yesterday, yes. And I think, though, the one thing that stands out to me in that No campaign is in that it's dividing Aboriginal people, because it is. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it, and it doesn't mean that we should not do anything. And nothing has worked up until this point, so we have to do something different. Mm-hmm. And the fact is, people argue that we shouldn't be leaving it up to the rest of Australia and we shouldn't be going through the Constitution and all that. But we have to do it this way, because that's how you get the substantive change. Mm-hmm. And all of the other arguments are completely misinformed. So I think if people just took the time to read about it and understand, they could appreciate that. But of course it's going to divide people, no matter what group of people it was that this was affecting. Mm-hmm. So
the Constitution, my understanding of the Constitution is that it represents all of us. But the fact of the matter, it doesn't represent First Nations people. There is something wrong when I say that. Why? Why isn't Australia mature enough to understand that there are First Nations people? Well, I've always said, everybody's Australian. We know that, and we understand it, we rejoice in it. And the different cultures are even better. I mean, I couldn't do without the Indian food these days, or the Asian food. It's like, if they packed up and went home, we would be lost, We were Ubering every couple of nights, me and my wife, and it's usually Indian So yeah, I want to just focus on one thing. I want to respond to that the mosquito. I haven't suffered the same fate, but I do a lot of heritage work in the bush, and I did suffer that fate with a tick, a kangaroo tick. And that was bad enough without the mosquito. So I understand where you're coming from. But also to say that Nelson Mandela was a great role model for all of us. And part of an inspiration I got out of that was the truth telling. That after all of the atrocities that happened in South Africa, and then he said, let's have a truth telling. And people who come along and tell the truth, we will forgive them and exonerate them. That is a major, major thing to do. Even though people are saying, well, I murdered your son and he's now buried at such and such a place. I mean, that was powerful. And for somebody like Nelson Mandela was awesome to do that. And so it set examples for us as well, that it doesn't matter what the issue is, there is a way to deal with it. And this is another hiccup for us, that we've got these votes and that. And I never, ever agreed with anything that the no was saying, because a lot of it was just, there's a word I could say, but I won't, out of respect for all the elderly women here. It is just nonsense. It is nonsense. It is simply an advisory. We do that with Perth City Council. We do it with South Perth City Council. We do it with Fremantle. And we're there as advisors. We're not there to rule anything or make any decision on funding or anything else. It has given advice how to deal with street people, how to deal with homeless people, how to deal with what's happening in the Perth City Council, South Perth, Fremantle, and all those different areas. And it works. And it works because we're there, and that we're willing to tell them, well, this is what you need to be doing. In every basic statistic that we have today that clarify us as Aboriginal, we are at the top. Deaths in custody, domestic violence, youth suicide, alcoholism, all of those things. And we are simply there because we don't have input into programs that government are putting together. They come along, they don't consult us, they don't ask us what's good for us. They set up a program, they spent millions of dollars, sometimes more than $1 million, and it's wasted because we don't go to those places because they don't suit us. The answers is within this mob sitting here and the other mob out there. And we could deal with this stuff if we was given a chance to do that. Atsik was a fantastic role model. Mark Latham made a stupid statement when he ran for the Prime Minister, said that if I get elected, I'll get rid of Atsik. Atsik was, Jerry Ann from Labor was the one that instigated Atsik. Atsik was simply an advisory group of representatives from all around Australia. And I was one of those representatives, and I was elected not only as the chairperson first that dealt with the premiers, but then as the National Commissioner that dealt with John Howard, Phil Ruddock, Amanda Vanstone, and every other politician over there. I walked the halls of Parliament for days trying to have a conversation. And I remember saying to Phil, after an hour's meeting, I said, Phil, I've been talking for an hour and I've been telling you all the things that are happening in our society and how to deal with them, even with the prisoners. I don't know why that we have people in there that are simply in there for a fine, that couldn't pay a fine. And there's all this rubbish along the road, and couldn't we be using them and base their parole around that sort of stuff, you know? And he said to me, he said, Farley, we've been talking here for an hour, he said. And I said, well, I don't think you understood me. I don't think you even heard a word I said, Phil. And he said, well, Farley, I think we need to meet another time, you know? It was one of the very first times when that anger of mine came to the surface, and I felt like grabbing a federal politician and punching the living daylights out of him. But I didn't. And I suffered with that for a long time. Just that I've been pouring my heart and soul out about issues and concerns within our community. And I don't think he heard a word. And I did it with everybody in Parliament. And I thought to myself, why am I voting? I vote for an individual, and yet they follow party lines. So, you know, it made me think. So, You know, that's me in a nutshell, being over there and experiencing that. And I thought that, you know, Peter Dutton getting up and saying very early on that he wasn't going to support this was a slap in the face to me. I thought we'd passed that sort of stuff. You know, we just had, you know, Morrison, you know, with these 4, you know, portfolios. I thought that was pretty sneaky in itself, you know. So, but, you know, not only suffering in our community, but I think that the non-Aboriginals are suffering in their community as well. And there's some major changes that need to happen with all of us, maybe.
I want to open up for questions because we have a bit of time left for that. Yes.
I just wanted to clarify the statistic that we're about 3.6% of the population. So we're relying on 97% of the population.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I wanted to open up for conversations, and I think this last point that Farley has just made about I think we talk a lot about the voice, but I think the other side of the equation is who's listening.
Who's listening?
So you've been listening, and hopefully you've got questions or points of clarification or things that you want to share about your feelings, your views, and where we go next in the next 10 days, the final stretch.
I just want to say too that I meant to say early part. Thank you for coming. It is great to have an audience to talk to. You know, doesn't matter what your views are. We need to give our story as well, and we hope that the story that we tell is interesting. You know, whether you make your mind up on that is up to you. But we did the best we could.
Yeah. So if people will just put their hands up, and then there's a microphone. There's a first question that there's going to be at the back, and I'll make eye contact, and you'll know that I've seen you. Okay. Yeah.
I want to ask a question. For about 70 odd years ago, we lived at 19.
Yeah.
Way out.
That's right.
And had,
Do you want to just wait 1 second so that we get you a mic, and then we'll bring the mic back to the top there. Okay. We'll just get this comment, and then we'll come back to you.
She lived in Laverton.
Right here at the front. Just so that everyone can hear you. Yeah.
Sing a song now.
it's just something that's stuck in my memory for 70 odd years. And when we lived there, they wanted to start a kindergarten, and there was nobody that wanted to do it, white or black or anything. And they said, "Would you do it?" And I said, "Yes, I would." So every morning during the week, I had children from about the age of about 4 to about 10 at the kindergarten. They were met in town, wore uniforms, which were really bright shorts and shirt that the ladies had made, and we walked up about from here to the other side of the road and to the school where they had showers. And the idea was that they were supposed to wash themselves. But they stripped everything off, got the soap, rubbed it madly in their hair, and there was all this dribble coming down all the time. And I'm saying, "But you're not washing yourself." "Yes, I am, Mrs. Parthas. Oh, yes, I am." And they'd go into their uniform, still with all this dribble, and go back to kindergarten. And I thought that was one of the loveliest things I'd ever seen, because the children were having a good time. It wasn't costing them anything, and they all enjoyed it. They just came along. So they didn't have to, but they did.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we're going to go up to the top.
All right, thank you. I just want to ask, when are we going to hear from disadvantaged youth? And I'm not talking about people historically, their grandparents or whatever. I'm worried that we have not heard, and we're not going to hear, from the very people who contribute to the statistics, the ones who are unemployed, the ones who live in, like our family, we live in a multi-generational crowded house. We have a lot of the statistics that other people are talking about, but we do not get heard. So I want to know how come, like, the library has chosen to have people who are not disadvantaged, and we should be hearing from disadvantaged youth. So I'll say, if you're taking up a spot, I'd generally ask people to be respectful of other people's opinions, to not dismiss their views, to listen to them. Even if you disagree, it's important in government policy, you've got to listen to people you disagree with. So when are we going to hear from disadvantaged Aboriginal youth?
Well, I guess that, a good question. Well, I guess that we speak with disadvantaged people all the time. We come from them. They are our grandkids. They are our children. They're disadvantaged. We're the voice of them because they're on drugs that was introduced to them. They are on all sorts of different things that was introduced. They can't get off it. There is no programs around unless they commit to it, and it has to be voluntary. So we sit here today as elders. We don't want to be sitting here. We don't want to be the spokesperson for everybody. But the fact of the matter is somebody has to do it. And so we sit here today and we don't speak. We know this is not going to do very much good for us. We're too old. The fact of the matter, we're here so that those disadvantaged kids and those kids that are coming up actually have a better life and can get things. That's why we're here. We're not here to take the voice away from anyone. We're here to represent their voice because they can't at this moment. They're still healing, and that's going to take a long, long time. And unless we have something major change in the way we deal with Aboriginal issues these days, it's not going to happen. And we'll have those people sleeping on the street and dying early of drugs. So that's why we get up out of bed every morning to do the stuff that we need to do. But thank you for your question.
Did I see?
I wanted to say something as well, actually. Yeah, I agree with what Pop said. You know, like standing behind me is, you know, there's hundreds of disadvantaged people, and like Pop said, I'm here speaking on behalf of them because they can't be here. You know, I don't know. I find it quite offensive, actually. You know, being judged by someone who doesn't know me, like. You know, you don't know the disadvantage that I've experienced in my family. Sure, I'm not disadvantaged compared to the most disadvantaged person, but I think disadvantage is contextual. You know, I'm nowhere near the richest person in this room either, so, you know, to say that we're not disadvantaged, I don't think is completely true. And yeah, I'm here speaking on behalf of all my mob who are disadvantaged and who can't be here. Thanks.
And I agree with Ezra as well, and respectfully, you don't know what we've endured in our families and what we deal with on a daily basis.
And voting's not about personal people or individuals. I'm saying that I'm saying currently, people who are disadvantaged currently, not historically, but currently. But kids on the street today, you know, those people, the people who are living in overcrowded housing.
Yeah, that's our family.
That's
our immediate family.
But that's our family.
That's exactly what we said.
We talked about that our home's open and these people are still living with us. We're still trying to deal with their issues.
I think you're doing a great job as elders. You've got no power. Powerless, even white youth powerless.
Yeah.
Drugs has taken a lot of that power away. And so somebody has to talk for them. And the only ones that are talking are the elders. We don't want to be put in this position. We want to be living the life of luxury, taking it easy, you know. We put a lot of hard yards in. We never worked in fantastic places. Everything that I ever did was labour until later on in my life. And no one helped me up, let's put it this way. No one helped me up. I lifted myself up to get out of that situation that I was in, to move forward. And sometimes you've got to do that. But I didn't have drugs that was in my way at that time. I didn't have alcohol that was in my way at that time. I had a father that worked. So I had role models. And so I did that. A lot of these other fellows they're so out of it with drugs that it's really difficult for us to even have them living at our homes, but we do, because we have to. No one else will do it.
I just want to add one point as well in saying it's not personal, but this whole referendum is personal for us because it's our lives and it's all of our families' lives. And we're just here to help, like speaking with them and for them. We're only representing ourselves, but we're also representing our families. And saying it's not personal is very dismissive of the fact that this whole referendum is about our identity and our families and recognising everything that we've been through. I don't think you can separate the personal aspect from that.
Thank you very much for sharing your beautiful stories. It's an honour and a privilege to hear such brutal honesty. Yes, I have been out and voted yes earlier today, so I've got my vote in. My question is, I'm really quite fearful if the outcome is a no. There's a lot of undercurrent of rage, if you like, in the no. So that is really a personal concern. I just wonder if you could speak to that, please.
Well, we have that fear as well. But the fact of the matter is we don't have control of it. And so, we rely on the vote to either get up. But, if it's a no, it's another kick in the guts, another hurdle to jump, and we start over again. But we never stop. Fact of the matter, we don't stop. We can't stop. There are too many people that are relying on us to keep going. And so at 80-something years of age, Albert is still here, presenting his story from where he comes from and what happened to him. Irene's still here, telling her story about what happened to her. I come along, and I'm younger than them, but somebody has to do it. One day maybe the tide will change. We might get a yes, and if we do, we'll all rejoice because it's going to help all of us. So, we hope. We live in hope. We always have lived in hope.
I'm curious to hear what the young people have to say to respond to that, the younger people on the panel, to respond to this notion of what happens next, because I think some of the older generation have a long history of having no's put in their face of different types. And so I'm curious what your feeling is about what happens the day after if it's a no, and what happens the day after if it's a yes.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to sound like too neutral and everything, but like I said before, like I'll keep doing everything I'm doing regardless of the outcome. I hope it's a yes, because I think if it's a yes, it's an opportunity for us to supercharge this process and this journey, and start to make some real headway on something that we've been avoiding for a long time. So yeah, I mean, if it's a no, I hope it's not going to be a no, but it's not going to stop us. I think it'll strengthen our resolve. I think it'll leave a big gap for accountability for state governments and federal governments, and that'll be a space that we can step into and leverage from. And so we'll just keep moving. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really want to know what it would be like if it's a no. I don't even let myself think about it because it would be so terrible, and I only want to think about it being a yes. And history looking back on this time as, wow, this is the time Australia stepped up and finally recognised, and took it to the next level, as opposed to the 67 one, which was a very basic recognition of rights. So for me, I haven't even entertained that thought because I am so wanting it to be a yes, and I don't know what will happen if it's a no. But I do think that our generation are very progressive and very socially conscious, and will move this forward regardless in some way. Yeah.
Good evening. I'm a 84-year-old proud Australian. I came to this country over 50 years ago from the UK, where all different religions, races, ethnicities live together without recognition. One of my problems now is we seem to be dividing the country between yes and no and having a referendum. I don't like this antagonism that's going on. I came here tonight to find out some questions. And I remember very, very early when we came here, we were given the hospitality of Aboriginal family so we could find out something about the things that we did not know as new migrants. Now, one of the things I find very difficult now and wonder what will happen in the future is when we fill in the census and various official forms, we have to tick whether we are Aboriginal or not. When do you think we will all be Australians. Because that path continues the divisive thing of saying we are this and you are that. I would like to suggest that it would be great if we could be all Australians, and anybody who is born in a country has a right to feel at home in that country, not be divided. I'd love your thoughts on this.
Well, personally myself, I don't we never want to divide anybody, but we have distinct people from where we come from. And I guess we want to be proud in that too as well. I love meeting the Irish that come over here, and they love to be in Australia. And the census are one of those things that goes around and asks you whether you're Aboriginal, whether you tick Aboriginal, or whether you tick non-Aboriginal, or whether you tick whatever nationality you are. And we just simply do that. It's a government process, and we tend to stick to that. We very seldom question it. And we hopeful that we might get to that point one day that we have the same rights as everybody else. Because at the moment we see ourselves as being the first Australians. We're not saying that anybody else is not Australian and they shouldn't be proud of it. And the analogy is that we're the kangaroo and emu. We were here first. And we're really happy to put down Aboriginal because it defines us, even though we struggle each day of our lives to be recognised as First Nations people and to actually even achieve anything that anybody else has ever done. But we're still at it. One day we might get to that. The day when it comes will be a really good day.
There should be a treaty, yes.
We've always said that. We've now settled from treaty, and we've gone to now the voice and the referendum as a recognition of the Constitution. The treaty was always about that, and it was about the truth-telling. And the truth-telling simply came from the African experience about, look, there were bad things done. Let's own up to it. Get it off our chest. Move forward together, without carrying any guilt of any complex of anything, and move along as Australians. That's what we want to do. So one day we might get to that. When it does, I guess we'll all get together and I might even have a drink. You never know. You never know. But I understand what you're talking about.
I'm interested in, because I think it's a question that comes up a lot, this question about people, often the forms get people going. People get upset about being asked these questions on the forums. And I'm curious about what it is about the question. Is the question itself divisive? Because a question can also be a way of just seeking information, right? So information is a fairly neutral thing, right? When you fill in your taxes, they ask you information about your earnings. So when you're asked any nature of questions, is that divisive, or is it that the question is about race, which has a particular history, which then has a lot of emotions attached to it that make it maybe feel more divisive than the use and the meaning of the question? So I think it is important to interrogate why the request for information about your ethnic background or your race, which is used for planning purposes, in the same way that questions about any other range of demographics, whether you recycle or not, or whatever, why does it feel divisive?
I think, can I add as well, because you just made the point that it's about information. That's the purpose of these boxes that you have to tick sometimes. Like in a medical setting, Aboriginal people are predisposed to a range of health conditions. I have to tick that box so that they know that I'm going to probably experience these issues, or that our life expectancy is 10 years less, or in education, that our education outcomes are far poorer than anyone else in the country. And this is across the board in employment and housing and everything. So it is a way of gathering information. But I think it's good to reflect on why that upsets people.
Yeah, I was just going to add as well, like I think I've heard this sort of, conversation around equality mentioned a few times, and I mean, it's not really about equality, it's about like respecting difference. And, it's not about us all being the same thing or, being painted with one brush. It's about us all being able to be ourselves. I think, and being able to be that comfortably and feeling safe in that as well. Because, you know, like as First Peoples, we're not the same as everybody else. Like, we're unique in this place because this is our country. You know, like, that's okay. That's not taking anything from anybody else. That's just the facts of the matter. Like, we are the First Peoples. We're sovereign to this place. The only other sovereignty that exists here is the Crown. You know what I mean? So we all need to come to terms with that and understand that. And it's not about putting us on a pedestal or above anybody else, but there's difference and it needs to be respected.
Actually, kind of changed what I was going to say. So I'm going to answer some of those questions, I think. To the man who asked, well, what happens if it's no? You're not old enough to know Charlie Perkins. He marched a group of people across the north of Australia, caused death, destruction, injury, until he got to the Kimberley, the wonderful, wonderful Kimberley, my home country. When he got there, the Aboriginals there said, we want no part of this. We want to be one country, but we don't want a part of this violence, right? What you said about being peace-loving people. That's the thing that scares me is going to be lost. There's always movements behind movements that create problems. Just look what's happening in places like Africa. That's what scares me if there is a no vote. So, fingers crossed. To the lady who asked about the people that are so badly affected, I'd like to see some white kids up here trying to do the same thing. I've worked with a lot of disadvantaged people, a lot of drug addicts, etc., and they don't have the personal strength to do that. It's just not in them at this point. In 20 years' time, when they get through the problems, maybe. But while anyone is going through challenges, they can't get up and talk to anyone. It's enough to get through a day. So, yeah. To the gentleman who I think may have come from England, to you I would say, think about what happened in Wales. Wales has only, in the last 16 years, been allowed to speak its own language. So we don't want those sort of things in our country. We fought very hard for a really long time to have a great country and unity that we still have. The Constitution was developed in the late 1800s, probably around the time of the Boer War politically. It was enacted in January 1901. There is not a person in this room that would want to live under the conditions of 1901 in 2023. So why are we even discussing it? The Constitution needs to be a fluid document. It needs to change with the times. Life has changed, society has changed, and we need to keep our Constitution up to date, if nothing else. And the lives of Aboriginal people have mostly changed. If you go to some areas in the Kimberley, Pilbara, Murchison, where my family grew up, you sometimes wonder, but then you think of the stories of what was before, and you realise that some places it hasn't really changed that much. I can remember not being allowed to go into my friends' houses. You know, I can remember in my first days of school, when I was 5 years old, learning to fight real quick because I was called all sorts of names. I don't want Australia to continue to be that sort of a country. So this is the importance of this vote, of this change to the referendum. Everyone says, oh, Mr. Dutton, bless his little soul, if you don't know, say no. Yet I don't know what the hell he is talking about because I cannot figure out what he is carrying on about except to say something that we all know. It has been clearly said what the wording of the Constitution will be and what the action will be after that. That's how our Australian government works. Should perchance that not be enacted, there are some really powerful international laws that would make that get enacted real quick. So, yeah, it's if you think you don't know, then go back and read what is going to be written into the Constitution, and what the second part of that is, which is the forming of voices, right? Every MP and senator in Australia is elected to represent his little area, and they're saying, well, you said it tonight, there's people who say, but it's dividing, there's not every Aboriginal is getting a voice. Not every Australian gets a voice. Your representative goes to Parliament and does what his party says. If I go to my local rep and say, I'm not happy about this, change it, it won't happen unless 80% of his constitution changed it and his party agreed to it. So that structure's about the same, right? So, yeah, at the end of the day, it does come down to yes and no, and to me the two important things are what will happen if it's a no, and I don't live, and I would not want to live, in 1901.
There's a question here, but did anyone want to say anything or pick up on anything that was said in the last comment? Yeah? Okay.
You pretty much covered it all.
Thank you. I just wanted to start by saying thank you so much for sharing your stories, and I can only imagine how many times you've had to do this over the last 6 to 8 weeks, so really appreciate you coming out yet again and sharing the incredible stories. But I wonder if, Ezra, you would be able to share some of that experience of being involved in actually helping to contribute to that incredible statement that's the Uluru Statement from the Heart. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. So my journey with the statement started in Perth because there was a Perth Regional Dialogue here, and it was on the 4th of March in 2016. I remember that because it was my birthday. And so we went along. I went with my mum and at the Perth Regional Dialogue. It was meant to be for Nyungas only, but because of the weather at the time, we had mob there from the Pilbara. I think there were people there from central areas, from Rimeri. Yeah. So there was a bit of a combined group at our one. And so what happened was, the conversation was had, and then we knew that the convention was going to happen the next year. So there was a voting of who was going to go and represent the Perth Regional Dialogue. And I was selected as a youth delegate, and there were about 10 of us, and then we added a couple of extras because of the other groups that were in the meeting with us. So we went to Uluru the following year, and to be honest, at the time I didn't really know much about what we were doing. Like, I was studying at uni, I'm an environmental engineer, so the Constitution and law was pretty foreign to me, and it took me a while to really understand what it was. And at the beginning I didn't really know if it was something I wanted to support. I was kind of just going on the journey to understand what it was. But the strategy that was presented and that unfolded was the best that I'd seen anywhere in my short life. And for me, it was about the best way forward. If there was a better way forward presented, then we probably would have taken that. But I think it was the best way. And yeah, it was an inspirational experience. Like, I was quite young at the time, and just sitting in the room, I sat in the room quietly. I didn't even do any talking, just at the back listening to the senior people from all over the country, and I was blown away by their intellect and their passion. And how could that not lead to a good thing? It was sort of like the vibe that I took away from it. And for me, like, when I'm being involved with things or looking to people to follow and as mentors, a lot of it comes down to their behaviours and actions, and what they do rather than what they say. And I can just say that what I saw there was the top of the rung in terms of people that I wanted to follow and people who I wanted to learn from. So it was pretty straightforward for me. Even though I didn't really understand the ins and outs of the constitutional change after that, I just felt like, how could I be in a worse company than this room? So yeah, it was inspirational. And then the day when it was read out, like, the statement was prepared overnight. We were there for about 4 days, and it was presented on the second last day, or was it the last day? I had to leave early, so I can't remember. But yeah, they read it out, and we were meant to go into a process of editing the statement afterwards. Like, the first draft was presented, but everybody just unanimously agreed that they were happy with that first draft. And so yeah, it was really powerful. A lot of tears, a lot of emotion. big learning experience, and I think, you know, it's something that I'd recommend to any other, you know, young Indigenous person, if these opportunities do come for you to spend time with your elders and to go on these collective processes, because that's the other thing I think that needs to be highlighted, is it was a collective process, and you know, it was no one person deciding anything. We all worked through it together. Yeah.
I just noticed that there's a hand that hasn't made a comment yet. Yes, in the blue, I think, in the blue.
Question?
Did you have your hand up with the blue jacket? No.
Can I just acknowledge the City of Perth elders that are sitting there, because I had the honour and pleasure to work with the elders for 2 years, and you guys don't know how much we would sit there with the CEO and fight over the same things over and over and over. And between all of them, 10 of them, 1,000 years of experience, struggle and resilience. We've already lost 3. How much longer are we going to wait? Aunty Irene's 80, Uncle Albert 80. You know, you got young Uncle Farley. We did a document there at the City of Perth called Nalak Wanganin. It was the City of Perth. It was supposed to be a treaty between the City of Perth elders and the CEO and the City of Perth. We did the treaty. It was all done during COVID. We printed it out. It was done in Noongar language. All the elders were going to sign it. We were going to call it a treaty. But guess what? The state government said, no, we're not going to call it a treaty. And then Basil came along, and it kind of just sort of like, what's that thing? What is it? What is it? What's it called? But if you'd seen the hard work, the blood, sweat and tears that went into that document, and the documentary that came out, Nalak Wanganin, us talking, it's on ABC iView. Please watch that, because that will give you a glimpse of what Uncle Farley, Aunty Irene, Uncle Albert, they went through. You know, and they still forgave everybody. We were sitting at that meeting with CEO Murray Jorgensen, and they were forgiving and kind and loving. If you guys have gone through all that and you still sit there and you're still forgiving and kind and loving, I will applaud you. I will vote yes for you. Do you know what I mean? It's about recognising what our elders, my nan and pop, what we all went through to get to where we are. It wasn't easy, bro. Sorry, I'm talking Langback language. But my sister girl here, her mum's also on the City of Perth Elders Advisory Group, you know, and losing that sense of self and memory and Alzheimer's. But what, do you know what I mean? What for? Like, we're 2023 and we're still fighting to be recognised? Come on now, people, you're better educated than that, aren't you? Yeah. So that's all I got to say. So can we applaud the elders, please?
I just want to quickly make the comment that to the gentleman who was talking about one nation, Australia being one nation, when English or British migrants first came to this country in the middle of the year, in the middle of last century, they walked straight into Australia and were counted in the population and were given the vote. At that time, Aborigines, First Nations people, were neither counted in the population nor given the vote.
Should $368 billion be spent on the AUKUS submarine project or be spent helping the First Nations people of Australia?
AUKUS.
I think that's the definition of a rhetorical question. Are there other questions or comments from people? Yes, up there.
More a comment than a question, but when I grew up, you know, we used to have the mission kids come to the farm every year when the shearing season was on, and there were six children in my family, and we'd all say, how come these kids have to do all the work? We were already divided. At school, We never learnt about Indigenous people. We never learned about our culture. And so we could never share that. And I think that what the voice does, it gives us the ability to share that. Yep.
Oh, sorry. You were in my blind spot. I'm coming to you.
I just wanted to say that through my work, and I've so enjoyed learning from elders. I think I've been to your centre, and from the young people. It's just been such a great experience, and I'm so thankful for your generosity. And like what it says in the Uluru Statement of the Heart, I feel that Aboriginal culture is a gift to our country, and this is a huge... it will all be so much more Australian after this if we say yes. So I just want to say so much thank you. I'm French as well, and I feel like I've discovered so much about who I am through this process. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Like the gentleman up there, I'm from England. I'm 80, and when I was a child, I only knew white people. When I was 16, there was the trouble in Rhodesia, and a lot of people came over to England, and I and my boss employed 3 or 4 of them, and perfectly all right. And then I travelled all over England, met the Scottish and the Welsh, and nothing wrong, all okay. Then in '74 we came over here just after my father had died. Mum wanted to come and see her sister, and come here, meeting all different people, all okay. And my main question now is, why are some of your people saying no?
Well, it's like a... I go back to the way Europeans fight their wars. It's divide and conquer. What is better, if you want to say no to something, to have an young Aboriginal girl standing alongside you, saying that she speaks for most of the Aboriginals, and she's saying no. So something's got to be right. And then you get Warren Mundine. Sorry to mention names, but he's a loony. He was the president of the Labor Party. He tried to get elected in the Liberal Party. He couldn't. He tried One Nation because he thought he'd be better there. He didn't get elected. So he's wandering around looking for a spot. That's what he's doing. And so by jumping on here, he gets the TV cameras pointed at him. He can make stupid and ridiculous comments. Any person that says colonisation was good for us needs to have their head read. I thought to myself when I heard that how silly it was, but I thought I better just check up on some of the historical stuff. And I saw where our mob was in chains and shackles, being brought down to prisons for spearing a bullock, or something as silly as that, and not understanding that we have a reciprocal society. If we give you something, we expect something back. And if it doesn't, our culture says, after so many months, then we can take what we need. It's the way we've worked for thousands of years, and it worked. The white people was about me. We were about us. and looking after us. When they came over on the boats to Western Australia, we met them at Rouse Head, and we said, Kaya, 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 welcome, welcome, welcome. We showed them where to live, we showed them where the best water was, and we helped them. We brought food to them. We brought fish, and we brought kangaroo, and we brought other stuff. On the expeditions, we took them on the expeditions. They couldn't get out of Perth. The bush was that thick. So we led those expeditions. And our warriors and trackers were renowned for doing that, because they were like our relations returning from Dreamtime. And it was our responsibility. Our responsibility is to look after people. And we did, until they started shooting our mob. And then we said, no, this is not our mob. This can't be our mob. Why are they killing us? Why are they poisoning the flour? Why are they doing bad things to us? Raping the women. They brought smallpox. They brought flu. They brought all sorts of other things. And then they started to shoot us. But we weren't a society that fought battles. We weren't warlike. We left that to the New Zealanders, to the Maoris. We left that to the North American Indians, because they were. And they fought every inch of the way. We only started later on in skirmishes. And it was Stone Age people fighting modern weapons at that time. But that's all we were. So, you know, we suffered. So when the news came back, in whatever form it came back as, that over in New Zealand, Captain Cook met his fate. And I think he was eaten. I don't know how he tasted, but must have been all right. But,
Yeah.
and it was like, well, he came over here and we made him feel welcome. And all of the people, and of course they brought convicts over, people who had already had a history of doing bad things. So the bad things that happened over here was just going to be automatic, and we suffered the brunt of it. They didn't get to the Kimberleys for 100 and something years. While that was happening, we were getting massacred down here and brutalised. The legal service, the medical service, all of the services that look after us these days came from the Nyungas and the people in the southwest who bore the brunt of colonisation. But we still stand with our hands open to go forward together, because that's what we do. We're not these ones that are going to get up and, you know, South Africa's a classic example, and other people, they will fight.
Oh, we fought.
To the end, they are fighters. And as some say, the Akawi in F Troop were lovers. Well, we are lovers. we forgive all that stuff and want to move forward together. So we are here today talking about the referendum. I'll give you a little example about my grandfather back in the 1967. I was 17 years of age at that time, just turned 17. And he said to me, he had a little transistor radio, no TVs, a transistor radio, living out in the bush. And he said to me, what's that thing they're talking about, Farley? And I said, it's a referendum. And he said, what's a referendum? I said, well, it's to take us from being fauna into being classified as human beings. And he didn't know that. He thought we were human beings. I said, no. We're with the flora and fauna. We're fauna. And this is to say whether we can be called human beings or not. And he said, look, I don't know what it's about. I don't understand the process, but I agree with it because it'll help my grandkids. I sit here today before all of you and say that I've got a heap of grandkids, and this is not for me. I'll be dead and gone by any time any of that stuff gets instigated or instituted or whatever it is. But I hope that it will help my grandkids live a better life than what I lived. So that's why I sit here today.
The place where this last input from Farley came from was I think a question around what happens when Aboriginal people voice concerns about and are on the side of the No campaign, and specifically I think the Jacinta Price factor. and Warren Mundine factor, because they're high-profile Aboriginal people who have taken very strong no stances in ways that are actually pretty confronting. Like they're not a progressive no. So I think it is important to address that, because I think people find it confusing and hard to, when they're talking with family in the next 10 days, as people are making arguments, I think it is important to be able to address that factor.
Add as well to remind everyone that it's over 80% support in the Aboriginal communities, and that's across the board, across the country. It's not just leaders or certain demographics, it's across the board. And it's that small minority who don't support it for whatever reason, but a lot of the time it's misinformation, and because of social media and all of this that we're just inundated with. But the more people of my own mob and from the communities that I come from, that I speak to, once I tell them this is what it's going to do, this is what it won't do, then they are on the side of yes, because simply just not knowing was the reason really behind it, the no before. So it's got very strong support in Aboriginal communities. It comes from our communities.
Yeah. Can I just say before I go, I've dealt over the years a lot of groups, and done a lot of work up and down the state, and a lot with Aboriginals, and a lot with disabled people, and a lot with elderly people, and when you look at them now, and you look at what it was like when I was little, and what they were all put through, you know, they were just ignored, anything that was different. And now people are making marvellous efforts to make things better. And I think everybody here, and everybody we can get to do it, needs to just keep pushing. That's all you can do. And I've worked with the government, and believe me, it wasn't a joke. But you've just got to stay there. And my father used to say to me, he was Welsh, and he used to say to me, you can be anything you want to be, provided you decide that's what you want to do and you keep after it. So that's my view.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've come to the end of our time together. I want to thank everyone for being here. I wanted to end by mirroring back to each of you something that you said that I thought was really beautiful, and that I hope people carry with them as they leave. So, Ezra made a wonderful point about recognizing difference, that the challenge that lies ahead of Australians is to recognize that we are different, and that strengthens us rather than weakens us. And I thought that was a beautifully put point. We don't need to be afraid of being different from one another. Yeah. Farley, you had a beautiful series of comments you made, and you said that our stories are intertwined. We belong to one another. And I thought that's, again, a beautiful way of phrasing that this is part of an Australian story. Yeah. Sophie, you talked about your parents who stood calm in the face of anger and used anger as a way to educate people. And I thought that was a beautiful set of reflections as well. Uncle Albert talking about fighting for your brothers and sisters as the best kind of education for fighting for your community for the rest of your life. So I thought that was beautiful as well. So thank you for those comments. I will hold that image in my head very firmly. And Aunty Irene, I was struck in your comments by this idea of you working tirelessly until you were 72 years old, and quite quietly in lots of different places, and then holding your family together with a strict set of rules at home. And I think that's the story of many Black women. Many Aboriginal women are holding it down That's right, and that often doesn't get seen, and those are the kinds of stories that people need to understand when they start to put people in boxes and stereotypes. So I thought that was a beautiful set of reflections, and I thought the way to end this wonderful conversation with lots of stories and lots of space for yarning is with a quote from my own people, from Nelson Mandela, who said, "For to be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others." So I hope people think about that as you drive away and have your kitchen table chats in the next few days. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank everybody for coming.